So you want to be a hunter, huh? Well, before you can, you gotta run 80 kilometers, and then cook the perfect dish, and then descend a tower full of traps, and then go to a deserted island, survive for a week, and capture your target's cards. And then...
A little of this, a little of that, a little this, that.
And after all that, you can finally be a hunter. So why is it like this? Why is it so convoluted and so complex and so difficult? Not to mention constantly changing. Like every time we see the exam, the qualifications are very different. The first one seems to be the most standard, which is surprising to say. And then for the second one, you just have to be Killua. And then the third one has completely different qualifications for the Dark Continent. While the convoluted and unique nature might seem random at first, I think it's definitely on purpose. Hunters have to be prepared for just about anything, from trying to complete a video game island to dealing with superhuman ants. Being adaptable is just part of the job. In fact, I'd say it's the most important part. Like, just think about the wide variety of challenging situations we saw in the show. Most normal people wouldn't be able to deal with any of those. In fact, I don't think any normal people would, which is another reason the exam is so complex. They have to weed out people that wouldn't be fit for the job, whether that's being physically incapable, mentally, or being a danger to other hunters, for the most part. We can see this very clearly in the 287th Hunter exam. With 5 phases, some of which had phases within phases, it was a deep and complex challenge that pushed the participants in basically every way. The first task right away was at surface level a test of endurance, but it was also a test of preparedness. If you chose to bring some sort of accessory, weapon, or something else to help you with this phase, you were allowed to use it. We can see this obviously with Killua and his skateboard, as well as Nicholas and his laptop, which he tried to predict the exam with. While these advantages didn't necessarily help either person, not that Killua needed the help, it still shows that the first phase was more than just an endurance test. Just like how the second phase is more than just a cooking exam. The second test, aka Hell's Kitchen, the phase also tests skills such as hunting, which could be useful to a magical beast hunter or maybe a sea hunter. Of course, it gets completely derailed, but even that isn't too far off for what hunters usually go through. Like, maybe you could say the way Menchi behaved was reflective of how off course a mission can go, but I don't think that was the intention. It's hard to tell exactly what the third phase is testing. Obviously, from our perspective, it seems like teamwork to some degree, but we don't really know what any of the other candidates went through, and we see quite a few of them exiting this phase alone. I think most of all, it probably tests problem solving. Based on what we know of the examiner and his reactions to the phase, it also tests other skills, such as combat ability, but there are a lot of phases that test this. Next up is the fourth phase. I think the tests of the fourth phase depend on the participants. For someone like Kurapika, and especially Gon, it really tests their ability to stalk their prey and look for an opening to attack. While their objectives were the same, the skill sets they required were obviously different, due to the vast skill gap between Hisoka and Tompa. However, participants such as Hisoka, Illumi, and even Killua require a much different skill set, and they're forced to play more defensively for the most part. You could also say that it tests teamwork, but I feel like that's more of an optional thing. You know, plenty of people made it through without teamwork. Lastly, we have the fifth phase. Obviously, the fifth phase tests combat ability. I mean, it's a fighting tournament, of course it does. What else would it test? Well, it would also test determination and grit. The participants that are the most determined to win usually come out on top, even with a huge skill gap. We can obviously see this in Gon's match versus Hanzo, but I also think we see a hint of that in Kurapika's match versus Hisoka. Yeah, Hisoka bowed out on his own terms, but based on what we see in the rest of the show, it's apparent that Kurapika would have fought until he couldn't anymore. Plus, Hisoka's not that great at not killing people, so he probably knew it would be easier to lose to Kurapika and fight someone with less determination. Obviously, most of that is speculation, but I think it makes sense given the characters and the circumstances. There could be any number of reasons that the hunter exam is the way that it is. Maybe it is to test all these different aspects that are required of a hunter. Or maybe it's just because that's how Netero wanted it to be that year. Regardless of the reasoning, I think the hunter exam makes perfect sense for the show. Thank you all for watching. I just started a community Discord as a place to talk about anime and just kind of hang out in general. There's a link in the description down below. Thank you all for watching once again, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next week.